What's up guys, welcome to another video. So last weekend I was supposed to create a video, but life got busy and then work got busy, so I didn't have time to create, edit, and post the video. So this weekend came about and I was like, nope, this weekend we're gonna have to create a video. So today we're going to talk about nested virtualization. So a couple of weeks ago I created a video talking about my Windows Environment Lab. Someone commented on that video saying that, hey, instead of just showing us the lab, why don't you just show us how you set up the whole thing? And I was like, that's a good idea. Why not do that, right? Because I did talk about the structure of the lab itself, and I talked about how the lab is segregated on the firewall level, but I didn't talk about how I set up the lab or the whole process that I went through to set up the lab. So today we're going to talk about nested virtualization. We're going to talk about how I set up my VM inside of my VM. Inception. Let's go ahead and get started. Okay guys, so before we get started, let's talk about what a nested virtualization is. And nested virtualization is when you run a hypervisor inside a virtual machine, which of course is running another hypervisor instead of a real hardware. So basically a VM inside of a VM. You can do this to help stay organized, which is one of the reasons why I do it. But there is also some downside to it as well. And one of those factors is speed. But we'll talk about that later in the video. This video is divided into several parts, so feel free to jump to what interests you by using the menu below. Let's go ahead and get started. So the first step, or the first thing you need to do, is that you need to make sure you have Proxmox set up. I set up Proxmox a while back. I'll post the video, or I will link to the video somewhere here. If you don't have it set up, you can take a look and then kind of go through the process and have it set up. So that's step number one. That's the first thing that you need to do. Step number two, you need to make sure virtualization is turned on your BIOS. So let's go ahead and go through that right now so you guys can see how to check that. Okay, so we need to make sure virtualization is turned on. If you already have Proxmox set up, it's most likely that it's already turned on. But if you don't have Proxmox set up and you're using maybe a desktop or something else, it's very important for you to check and make sure virtualization is turned on, because if you don't check and make sure it's turned on, you're not going to be able to run nested or set up nested virtualization, and you're going to start wondering what is wrong, what am I doing wrong? And then that's because you do not have virtualization turned on your BIOS. So for this, and again, if you already have Proxmox set up, it's most likely that it's already turned on. But for those of you guys that don't or not using Proxmox, this is how you go about turning it on. I'm using my iDRAC right now, so I'm going to go ahead and turn my server on. And I'm going to actually, before I do that, let's cancel that. I'm going to go ahead and launch this. All right, so we can have a better view of it. It's fine, we can close that. Server is not on right now, so I'm gonna go ahead. I'm using iDRAC. Remember, I'm remoting into my server right now. I'm gonna turn the server on here. So go ahead and turn the server on. That's okay. Most likely hear it in the background, and we're gonna pull this up, drag this up here, make this a little bit bigger. Okay, so we'll go ahead and virtualization is the server is turning on now. So you want to use your keyboard in front of you. If you have a keyboard and a mouse, you want to pull that in front of you. Remember, to enter into your BIOS or to enter into your system setup, you're going to use different keys depending on the hardware that you're using. Each manufacturer have a different key that you have to press to enter into your system setup. My server is Dell, so for the most part it's mostly F2. So it's going to wait for it to do its thing and load up. Give it a couple of seconds. Normally takes some time to load up. Again, we're checking this to make sure virtualization is turned on. There you go, F2. To make sure virtualization, go ahead and press F2. Notice that it says F2 here. It's normally going to tell you on whatever server that you're using. It's going to tell you what to press to enter into the system setup. In my case, as I said, I'm using Dell, so it told me to press F2. So it's Dell PowerEdge. It's loading up. And we're going to give it a couple of seconds to load up, and then we're going to go ahead and check and see. I don't necessarily need this anymore. Let me go ahead and close that. Again, this is just a virtual keyboard. You have your keyboard in front of you, so you should be fine on that end. So I'm going to go ahead and close that. Let it do its thing. And again, we're checking for virtualization, as I was saying earlier. We're checking for that because if you don't check your processor and make sure your processor is capable of handling virtualization, and you don't have it turned on, when you try to run nested virtualization or any other sort of virtualization software, it's going to tell you that you cannot run it. So that's why we're checking, especially if you're using something else or you don't have Proxmox set up, you need to check and make sure this is set up. So we're going to go ahead and go into BIOS settings, system BIOS settings, or system BIOS. Click on that. And then we're going to go ahead and go into processor settings, the setting right here, and then just, I'm using the up and down arrow here, click on enter. And then what we're looking for is this guy right here. So this guy right here, I'm going to go to that where it says virtualization technology. We want to make sure it's enabled. So if you click enter, there's two options. If it's disabled like so, you want to make sure it's enabled, right? And as I said earlier, most likely if you already have Proxmox set up, it's already turned on and enabled, because when you were setting it up, you most likely enable it. So you want to make sure it's enabled. Once we do that, we're going to click enter, and then escape, and then escape one more time. It's going to ask you if you want to save the settings. You're going to click yes, and it's going to save the settings is saved successfully. You click enter, and that's pretty much it. And now you can click escape. Are you sure you want to reboot? You said yes, and that's it. So now we've checked, and then make sure virtualization is turned on our BIOS. So that's step 2. Number 3, we're going to need to download and upload Windows Server OS to Proxmox. You can choose whichever one you want, whether 16, 19, or 22. We just need to download it and upload it. In this process, I'm going to show you how to download the trial version from Microsoft. I think you can have it for trial, or you can play around with it for about 180 days, and after that you might need to get a license, or you would definitely need to get a license if you want to use some parts in the future of the OS. So in this step number 3, I'm going to show you how to download the trial version of Windows Server OS and upload it into Proxmox, because we're going to need it for the coming steps. So let's go ahead and get started on that. Okay guys, so for this step number 3, we're going to go ahead and download and upload Windows Server 2016 or 2019, whichever one you want, to Proxmox. So to download it, I'm going to include this link in the description. Microsoft does have a trial or evaluation version of the Windows Server 2022, 2019, 2016. It's 180 days. I think for that 180 days, you have full control. You can do whatever you want in terms of like capabilities and stuff like that. But after the 180 days, then you're going to need to pay to continue to use it. So make sure you read a little bit about that. I could be off a little bit in terms of like what capability you have or what you can do with it for that 180 days. But last I checked, for that 180 days, you can play around with it as much as you want. And after that, you will need to pay for it, right? Now, if you do have a license Windows Server 2022 or Windows Server 2019 or 2016, you can go ahead and just use that instead of downloading it from here. But for those of you guys that just want to play around with things, this is how you go about playing around with it. And then once the 180 days is done, you can go ahead and try to buy it or do whatever it is that you want to do. So what we're going to do is just going to click on the drop down here and click on that. And then it's going to give you an option, say you want to download the Azure, the ISO, or the virtual lab, right? We want the ISO. So we're going to click on ISO there, and then we're going to click on continue. It's going to ask you for a little bit of an information, your child's first name and your I'm just kidding, Microsoft, right? So go ahead and fill that out. I'm just gonna put random stuff here. You guys know my last name. Surprise. It's called Koroma. RMA company, let's say Koroma Tech. And then it's gonna select your size 1. Job title, who knows, let's put something random. Hey, IT professional. The IT professional. Gonna go ahead and put my email. We don't like giving my emails, but what do you have, right? Oh, that. Oh, I've noticed that you guys are sending me emails, by the way, so I'm trying to read them, but sometimes it gets so busy. And just if you send me an email, please make it short, because some of the emails are so long, and I'm like, man, I'm gonna try to read it, but it's just so long. So try to make it as short as possible. Phone number, I'm gonna put a random number here, 301 968 2548, something random. Country, let's put a random United States. And then you click yes, saying that they want every part of your information. Just kidding. Read the privacy statement if you want to, but once you fill that out, you're going to click continue. And again, you do not have to do this if you already have a Windows Server 2016 ISO laying around, right? You can use that. If you have something that's already licensed, you can use that. But for those of you guys that don't, this is how you go ahead and download it. So we're gonna go ahead and select the version that you want, your language. Go ahead and click English, and you click on download, and it's gonna download. It's 6.5, so it's gonna take some time. So I'm gonna come back when it's done, and then from there we're going to upload it to Proxmox. So that's pretty much step number 3. So let's give it some time to download, and I'll be right back. Okay, so the download is now completed, so it's in my download folder. So now what we want to do is we want to upload this guy right here to Proxmox so we can use it to set up Windows Server 2016. So we're going to minimize that. We're going to, again, you can download whatever version you want. Just do a little bit of research, as I said earlier. Make sure whatever version you download and support Hyper-V. You can go ahead and even download a Hyper-V Server 2019, but again, just do a little bit of research on it and see how to set it up on Proxmox. So we're gonna go ahead and go to Proxmox here. You're gonna go to local here, and then you're gonna go to content. So not summary, content, and then in content you're gonna say you want to upload, and then we say we want to upload an ISO, right? And then we select the file, and then we're gonna go to our download folder here, and we're gonna select this guy that we just downloaded, and then we're gonna click open. Again, we're doing this because we're going to need this ISO to be able to install Windows Server 2016 on one of our VM, right? Because you need the ISO to set up whatever VM you want to set up, whether it is a Linux VM or Windows VM, or whatever VM you want to set up. So once we have that, I'm going to go ahead and click on upload. It's going to do its thing. Again, I'm going to let it run because it's a bit of a big file, and I'll come back once it's done. Hey guys, so the upload is completed. So basically what we did this step is that we went ahead and download Windows Server 2016, and then we upload it to Proxmox. So just to confirm, if we go back to local here, you notice that we have Windows Server 2016. So we should be good to go now for the next step. So let's go ahead and move on to the next step. Number 4. So for step number 4, you're going to need to turn on nested virtualization on Proxmox. When you set up Proxmox and you install it, and if you go through the video and go through that whole process, nested virtualization is not turned on. Now, one of the things that I want to make clear is that I am going to link to the page below that talks about this in detail. So make sure you read it, make sure you understand what you have, and make sure you understand how it relates to the server that you're running your Proxmox on, right? Because you're going to need to turn on nested virtualization for this to work. If you do not turn it on, it's not going to work, and I'm going to show you guys that moving forward. But for step number 4, we're going to go ahead and turn on nested virtualization. I'm not going to go into too much detail about what version is needed and all that stuff. That's why I'm putting the link in the description box below, so make sure you go read it, make sure you check it out. You need to do a little bit of homework yourself and then try to understand how it relates to whatever hardware you're running. So let's go ahead and let's turn on nested virtualization on Proxmox. So for this next step, we're going to enable nested virtualization on Proxmox. This is very important. If you do not enable nested virtualization on Proxmox, it's not going to work. When you try to run Hyper-V in Proxmox, it's going to tell you that it's not supported because nested virtualization is not enabled on Proxmox. So you need to enable it. This part is very important. You need to enable it before you move on to the next step. So I'm going to include this documentation. Proxmox has created a detailed documentation of how to go about to set it up and other things to look for as well when you're enabling nested virtualization in your Proxmox environment. So I'm going to go ahead and include this link in the description box below. So make sure you check it out and read it in detail and see how it applies to your server. So the part that we're looking for is this part right here, enable nested virtualization. The first thing we're going to do, we're going to check to make sure nested virtualization is enabled or turned on my Proxmox. In this case, I've already turned it off, so you guys can go see how I go through the process. I'm going to go ahead and grab this command. We're basically going to cat the command. Cat basically means that display. We're going to display this this file on the screen. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to cat this. So we're going to go ahead and do that, copy that. I'm going to copy it because I don't want to type it all. And then you're just going to go to run this command. Let's say you were somewhere else. You want to come to the top level to your data center, right? And then you want to click on you're going to come to your node and you want to click on shell. Once you click on shell, it's going to give you this prompt. You can clear this just to clear things up, and you're going to paste it in. Right now you can type it in if you want. You're going to cat it, and we're going to cat this file right here. So once we click on enter, it's going to give us no. So no means that nested virtualization is not enabled right now on this Proxmox environment, or on this specific node or cluster, whatever you want to call it. On this specific cluster, nested virtualization is not enabled. Right now you can go ahead and enable it. And again, this is very important. If you do not enable nested virtualization here, Hyper-V is not going to work. So this part is very important. I know I sound like a broken record, but this part is very important. You need to make sure you enable nested virtualization for Hyper-V to work. So we're going to go back to this documentation, and it's telling us that, hey, if you want to activate it, this is the command that you're going to run. So if you're using an Intel processor, this is the command that you want to run. If you're using AMD, this is the command that you want to run. I'm using Intel, so basically I'm just going to grab this command here, right? And then we're going to come over here, and then we're going to paste that in, and then we're going to click enter. After you click enter, if you rerun the command to check whether or not nested virtualization is enabled, you're still going to get no, because you need to reboot the system for it to take effect. So as you can see, I still have no. So what you want to do, you just want to do reboot, click enter, and the server is going to reboot. So we're going to wait till the server come back on, and we're going to check it one more time, and this N should change to yes. Again, this is very important, because if you do not turn on nested virtualization, Hyper-V is not going to work. So let's go ahead and let the computer reboot, and then we're going to the server reboot, and we're going to check it one more time. Now the server is rebooted. Let's go ahead and clear that one more time. We're going to go ahead and check again and see if we have a nested virtualization enabled. So let's go ahead and try to see if we can get that command. We can that, and we're going to click enter. So now, as you can see, same command, by the way. So it's just this command, the first command that we're running to check. Not to confuse you guys, I just press the up arrow there to go back to the previous command, or you can do history and then try to get that command. But if you just want to copy and paste, you can just paste that. Oh, need to get rid of that. Sorry about that. Let's get rid of that. We just need from the cat, and then click on enter, and then you can see now nested virtualization is enabled. Again, this part is very important. Again, I know I sound like a broken record, but this part is very important, because if you do not have nested virtualization turned on, Hyper-V is not going to work. So that's pretty much it for this step. Let's move on to the next step.
Step number five, we're going to set or install, go through the installation process for Windows Server 2016, right? So Windows Server 2016 is what I decided to upload to my Proxmox server. Again, you can choose whatever you want, but Windows Server 2016 is what I choose to upload. Now we're going to go through the process, because you're going to need it. Go through the process of installing Windows Server 2016 before we move on to step number 6. So let's go ahead and go through that process.
Yeah, so for this step, we're going to go ahead and set up Windows Server 2016. So we're going to go ahead and go through the installation process for Windows Server 2016. On the previous step, we went ahead and upload the Windows Server 2016 to our Proxmox. So what we want to do now is we want to set up a VM and go through the setup process for Windows Server 2016. So what we want to come to the tab level here, the top level, our node here, right click on it and click on create a VM. Want to call this VM. You can change this number according to your liking. We're going to call it VM hyper-v-test, and then we're going to click next. You can leave this as default. That's fine, because it's the only node that you have. If you have another node, I guess you could choose it, but that's the only one that I have. So you can click on next. You don't need to click on advanced here. Here it's asking you what ISO you want to use. Again, this is the ISO that we have set up, or this is the ISO that we uploaded on the previous step. This is the Windows Server ISO, and that's the one that we need. It's not a Linux system, it's a Microsoft Windows system, so you want to select that. You want to click next. For this one, you can leave as default, or you can play around with it according to your liking, but you can go ahead and leave this one as default. Click on next. Here again, you can change and see whichever storage you want to install it to. I'm installing it here on my default and bigger storage. Here, make sure you choose your space accordingly, the size of your hard drive accordingly, because remember, if this is a Hyper-V server, when you set up your Hyper-V, or when you start setting up VM, they're going to eat into the space. So you want to choose it accordingly, according to whatever specification you have in mind for your Hyper-V server. In my case, it's just a test. I'm just going to do 100. This you can leave as default. You can change things if you want. Again, make sure you read up on it so you understand what you're changing before you change it. So go ahead and click next here. This is very important. This is a very, very important part of things. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later because I did run some tests so you guys can see when things fail. But this is very important. So again, remember that this is a Hyper-V server. So you want to add your cores, your circuit according to whatever it is that you're going to use this Hyper-V for. In my case, this is a test. I'm going to do 2 for now, just 2. But again, if you don't want things to be slow, you don't want things to be laggy, you have to choose according to what you have and according to how you want your stuff to perform. This part is very important as well. Let me go down here for a second. Scroll down here. This part is very important for your processor. You want to make sure you select the right processor, right? Because we want to make sure we use the host processor. The reason being that this server that I'm running has an Intel processor which support virtualization. If you choose a processor here that doesn't support virtualization, when you are setting up the Hyper-V, or when you want to install a Hyper-V role inside of Windows Server 2016, we're going to look at that later, it's going to fail if you don't have that set up the correct way. So it's very important that you select your host server, or you select your host processor for your VM to use your host processor, or you select a processor here that supports Hyper-V, because if you do not, again, it's going to fail. I'm going to show you guys that later, but I just wanted to make that very clear. So you want to scroll all the way down and say use the host processor, the host meaning the server processor. My physical hardware processor, that's what I wanted to use, which has Intel, right, which supports virtualization. All right, so this part is very important. I'm going to show you guys, if you don't do this the right way, I'm going to show you what error you're going to get later on when we go through the Hyper-V setup. So make sure you choose the host processor and then click next. For this part, again, this is your Hyper-V server. You have to kind of see how many memory you need, how much memory you need for whatever lab that you're setting up, because again, your VMs that you're going to set up in your Hyper-V environment is going to eat up some of that. So we're just going to do 3 for now because it's a test environment. We're going to click next. This is network. So for network, you can segregate things if you want. For me, I do have segregation set up, so I can choose whichever network I wanted to see, or whichever NIC I wanted to see. This is where I keep things separated. My lab environment is separated from my actual home environment, just to keep things safe and keep things separated. So if I break something, it doesn't break in my home environment. So you can say, hey, I don't want it to have any network, no network device attached. And you can change this as well. It doesn't have to be permanent. You can change it whenever you want. But for now, we're just going to give it 1, and then we're going to click next, and then you can click finish. If you want to make any changes, you can just go back. And once you go back, if you click next, it's just going to go to the next one and go all the way down. You can just come to this one and then click finish, and it's going to appear here. So as you can see, it does appear here. So the next thing that we want to do, we're going to go ahead and start this and start the installation process. So we're going to get the installation process is pretty straightforward. It's like a regular, well, it looks like a regular Windows installation. If you've gone through a Windows installation before, you should be fine on this end. So we're going to go ahead and click start. I right click there and then click start. It's going to start the VM. And I'm going to make this full screen. To make this full screen, I think in one of my videos there was a question as to how you make things full screen. So you click on cancel, you click on this little guy right here, and then you click on this guy right here. There's more settings here that you can play around with if you want to, and you can turn things up here as well. But you just click on that and it's full screen. So now you're going to get rid of that. It's going through the regular install. It's doing the installation, loading files and all that stuff, all the good stuff. Just give it a couple of seconds. Okay, regular Windows install, nothing special here. It's gonna ask you your language. Click on next, English. Make sure you select the right language, by the way, because if you if you select the wrong language, you're gonna have to restart it to go back. So let's go ahead and click on install. You don't want to select French if you speak English, or Chinese if you speak English. That'll be some trouble for you. So let's go ahead and click next. Setup is starting. I'm gonna give it a couple of seconds. It's asking us what do we want to do. Windows Server 2016, Windows Server 2016 data center is asking us what we want to do. One of the things that you want to keep in mind is this desktop experience. try not to select anything beside this one, because if you select something else, it's going to give you some kind of like a core. For those of you guys that don't know what a core is, kind of like just all you see is just straight up, you know, straight up command line interface, and you're going to really need to know how to work your way around to be able to do that. So we want to select the second one. Again, if that's what you want and you're used to that, have it be. Select whatever it is that you want to do. We're going to select the desktop experience, and we're going to select the first one, the second one, and then click on next. Now you can again select whatever suits your needs, but for me, I'm selecting the second one here. Click on next. It's going to go through the installation process. Again, looks like regular Windows installation. Microsoft is going to ask you for your firstborn. You're going to click accept, and then you're going to click on next. We're not doing an upgrade, we're doing a clean install, so we're going to do custom installation of Windows on the advanced. That means that we don't have anything on it. It's going to show us our storage here. This is the amount of storage that was selected. Again, this your Hyper-V is going to eat up some of that, so you need to set it according to your specification or how you want things to be set up. Right, click on next, and it's going to do its thing. It's going to go through all the Windows installation. I'm going to let it run, and then once that's done, I'm going to come back. Okay guys, so the installation is done. We are going to go ahead and set a password. Regular Windows Server 2016 install here. You can set this password to whatever you want it to be. Let me go ahead and set a password for this. I'm going to make it the famous password 123. Yeah, this is just test here. Click on finish. It's going to go through finalizing things, and there you go. We have Windows 2016 installed. Let's go ahead and log in. I'm gonna go ahead and click on this guy, and this guy we're gonna say send control delete. This, by the way, is control delete, and I'm gonna enter the password, which is, and now we're logged in. I'm gonna give it a couple of minutes here, a couple of seconds, and there you go. We have Windows Server 2016. You can say yes to this if you want it to be discoverable in the network. I said no. There you go. We have Windows Server 2016 installed and set up. Okay, this is the step number 5. We're gonna go ahead and get step number 6 started.
Step number 6. So for step number 6, now we're going to turn on, or we are going to, well, not turn, well, yeah, we're going to turn on Windows Hyper-V on Windows Server 2019. So we install Windows Server 2019. Now we're going to enable or turn on the Hyper-V feature or the Hyper-V role on the Windows Server 2019. This will allow us to have, well, a virtualization inside of a virtualization, so nested virtualization kind of stuff going on. So let's go ahead and set that up.
Okay guys, so this is the last step. For this step, we are going to go ahead and add the Hyper-V role on the server. So this is the server that we just set up, or the Windows Server 2016 standard evaluation that we just set up, 180 days evaluation that we just set up. We're gonna go ahead and add the Hyper-V role on the server, and this server will become technically our Hyper-V server, where we can set up other VMs to manage. So basically, this is one of the reasons why I like it, because it keeps things organized. So I have one central server on the side here. Let me minimize that. I have one central server on the side here that says, hey, this is for specifically for this project, and in there I set up all of my other VMs that I want, so I don't have things all over the place here. So that's why it keeps it organized for me. So we're gonna go ahead. The one thing you want to do to get started here, just click on server manager. This is gonna pop up. This is the guy that you're looking for. I'm gonna show you guys something here. Remember when I said that if something is not activated, if nested virtualization is not activated, you're gonna get an error. I want to show you guys that real quick, how it will look like if it's not activated. So what we want to do, we want to come to manage here. I want to go to add roles and features. This is just a default page here. You can always skip that if you don't need it. Just kind of information, default information page here. Click on next. We would add in a role based or feature based installation. Click on next. Here you're going to say select a server from the server pool. If this was part of several, if this server was part of a domain and there are other servers in this domain, you will see them here, and you have to select the other one, the one that you're looking for. In this case, we only have one because we only have one set up in this environment, so which is this one. We'll click on that, and then we'll click on next. And then here we're going to say we want to set up Hyper-V. So we're going to click on check Hyper-V, And one of the things that you're going to notice is that this is going to fail because again, if nested virtualization is not turned on, that's going to fail. So we're going to go ahead and click add feature, and then we're going to go ahead and click yes. So this is what I wanted to show you guys. So as you see, it says right here, it says Hyper-V cannot be installed. The processor does not have required virtualization capabilities, right? So this is what I wanted to show you guys, and I intentionally, when we were going through the setup, I intentionally left that as well because I wanted you guys to see that. So we are going to change something, but I left this because I wanted you guys to see this error. There's two reasons why this error is going to happen. Number one is that the processor that you select when you're setting up the VM is not a supported processor for Hyper-V. Number two, nested virtualization is not turned on. The reason why I left it the way it was the first time is because I wanted us to see this error. This is the error that you will get if nested virtualization is not turned on, or you do not select the processor that is supported or that supports Hyper-V. Okay, so now that we've talked about the error that you see if you do not have nested virtualization turned on or you do not have the right processor selected, let's go ahead and go through the installation with everything set up the way they're supposed to be set up. So you have nested virtualization turned on and you have the host processor selected. So let's go ahead and say server manager. All right, click on that, and then we're gonna go ahead and say manage. We're gonna go ahead and say add roles and feature. Gonna go ahead and say next. Same stuff that we went through earlier. You can skip that. You can skip that if you want. Click on next. Click on role-based feature. Click on next. Click on that guy right here. Again, this is the same thing that we went through earlier. So just click on next, and then you want to say Hyper-V. So ideally, we shouldn't see that area anymore because we have all the right things selected. So number one, you have the correct processor selected, or you select the correct processor. Again, let me go back and show you guys that. So if we go back, get out of this, if we go to hardware, this guy right here, you notice that we're using the host processor, right? We're not using any other processor that's not that does not support virtualization. So let's go back to cancel. We'll go back to big screen there. Full screen there, can get rid of that, and then let's go ahead and add feature. Now that should be, you should see a check mark next to it. So there you go. So again, if you do not have nested virtualization turned on and you do not select the right processor, you will not be able to see this. You will get that error that we saw earlier. So once you select that, I'm going to go ahead and click next, and it's gonna check all of the stuff that you need to install on the second screen here. You're gonna just go ahead and click next. Go ahead and click next. Here it's actually, if you want to use this network, go ahead and select that. Install the one that you have. And again, once you have Hyper-V set up, you can create new switch. You can do things as much as you want to. So we're gonna go ahead and say that's fine. Make sure you read this first, of course, again, because again, I'm going through our quick process here. Make sure you read this, you understand it before you go to it. You can set up virtual switch, you can set up different things as you want to once you have Hyper-V set up. And again, click next. Here is actually if you can configure to send and receive live migration of virtual machine on the server. You don't necessarily have to choose that here. Allow the server to send and receive live migration of virtual machine. You can select that. Again, make sure you read up on that to understand it. I'm not going to select it for this demo because I don't necessarily need it. Go ahead and click next. Go ahead and click next on this one, and we can say yes. Go ahead and click that. Basically, we're telling it to restart it if it's necessary. So if the server needs to be restarted, go ahead and restart it. Required, click yes, and you can go. You don't necessarily have to choose it, but you can. You don't necessarily have to restart it if restart is needed, but if restart is needed, why not, right? So click on yes, click on install, and just give it a couple of minutes. It's gonna go ahead and install it. So let's go ahead and give it a couple of minutes, let it do its thing, and then after that, that's pretty much it. So the installation is completed. The server did rebooted because it needed to. So we are going to go back into server manager, and then once you're into server manager, you see the Hyper-V role right here. Let's give it a couple of seconds to load. So you should see the Hyper-V role right here. So once you click on that, you can right click on this guy and then say Hyper-V Manager. Just click on this guy right here and the Hyper-V Manager should come up. So there you go. So now you have Hyper-V Manager. You can pin this to the taskbar if you need. You can go ahead and set up a new VM, a new virtual machine inside of your Hyper-V. Go through the regular whole setup of a VM inside of your Hyper-V Manager. So basically this is how you will set up and install a VM inside of a VM. So we have Hyper-V Manager inside of this VM that's running on another VM. So all of our VMs, so things like different VMs that I'm going to be running for, let's say a test environment here, all of them will be listed here instead of being listed out here on my Proxmox server. So it makes things a little bit organized for me. I just like it. It's fun and it's a lot more easier instead of just having them out there. So now you have it set up. You can install as much virtual machine as you need to. Just remember that depending on how much space you have, depending on how much memory you have, when you set up your virtual machine on Proxmox, when you set up the VM on Proxmox, that's going to reflect what your VMs have in your Hyper-V. So that's pretty much it, guys. That's how you will set up a VM instead of a VM, so nested virtualization.
Okay guys, so that's pretty much it for the video. So that's pretty much how you set up nested virtualization in Proxmox. So remember, we went through a whole series of process. If you did skip a step, make sure you went back. If you want to watch it over and over again, make sure you go back and watch it all over again. But that's the process that I had to go through to set up my nested virtualization inside of my Proxmox. I hope this video has been helpful in some way. If it has, make sure you hit the thumbs up button. If you do want to see videos like this all the time, make sure you hit the subscribe button. I'm also thinking about coming out with something on Wednesday, but I'm not going to talk about it yet until I have everything figured out, because you know, life, I don't want to say I'm going to do this and then life happens. So definitely make sure you hit the thumbs up button. Make sure you hit the subscribe button for more videos like this, turn on your notification. And as always, do not forget to stay geeking, and I will see you guys on the next one.